Hello, everyone. Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi, Arsen. How are you doing?
Pretty good. And I'm the only one who can answer you. You need to. We need to make our guests speakers. So
Okay.
let me just do that real quick.
Of course. Cool. Thank you. And I will just start kind of bubbling a bit about the introduction and stuff, right? I'm super pumped to have you guys here, not only talking about the amazing panel of Bitcoin global and especially also European Bitcoin experts, but also all of you that are listening and joining these spaces. We haven't done spaces for quite some time. I don't know why, because last time we did it, it was actually super successful and like hundreds of people showed up. And we thought maybe this time, because last time we didn't even have really influential people talking about us about this topic, which is basically a couple of Relai team members, and already that got people super excited. And now we thought, look, if we do this again, we will just invite some amazing guests because as you probably know, as kind of the number one Bitcoin only brand in Europe, we have built quite a good network of Bitcoin experts in Europe, but also globally in the last 3 years. So we are super excited to present you this amazing board of experts. Some of them are our advisors, some of them are our investors, and some of them are just friends and partners of the project. So I'm super pumped to have, for example, Lina Seiche here, ladies first, right? I don't think they need to be introduced. I'm just letting the audience know who's on the panel, and then we'll just start with a quick introduction, and then right into the discussion. So we have Lina Seiche, we have Joe Nakamoto, we have Alex Frankenberg, and we have the one and only Jeff Booth in here. I can't believe you made the time. Thank you, Jeff. It's always crazy to me to see how you find time for things like that in your super busy schedule. It seems like you have 48 hours a day and not 24. But honestly, I'm really appreciate you being on the show here. Giacomo Zucco as well will be on the panel, one of our very early investors and advisors who guided us and kept our focus on Bitcoin only and kind of true to our values. And then we have someone who certainly all of you German speakers know. We have the block trainer, which is called, in real life, he's called Roman. We are friends for years now as well. He was one of the first and most influential content creators that invited me to his podcast, like almost probably 3 years ago when we first started Relay. And from there, it really took off because obviously he's the number one Bitcoin content creator, Bitcoin YouTuber in the German-speaking area, the DACH area in Europe, and it's 100 million people that he potentially will reach with his content. Now I think it's a couple of 100,000, but after the next bull run, I'm sure it's going to be millions. So thank you guys for being here. The topics that we want to discuss is basically why are we Bitcoin only? Why does it make sense for any startup to position as Bitcoin only? Because there's so many other things you could do with crypto, obviously, and just traditional fintech, fiat investments, whatever that many other startups do. But in the last couple of years, it was really clear that this Bitcoin only narrative emerged and became super relevant and more significant. More and more companies, but also more and more investors, VCs like Ego Death Capital and Jeff Booth, for example, came to the space and really are investing millions and a lot of time and a lot of talent is flowing into this Bitcoin only narrative. So we want to kind of discuss this question on why does it make sense to be Bitcoin only as a startup, as an investor, as a player in the industry, rather than going this whole crypto route, then what is happening in terms of regulation? The SEC in the US, maybe Jeff can talk a little bit about that. And then in Europe, what will this mean for EU regulation? What is MiCA? How is MiCA going to affect companies and the whole industry, and how is the industry going to evolve? Also, they're looking at Bitcoin only versus crypto. Like, will this affect Bitcoin only companies differently than crypto companies? Will there be a difference between non-custodial and custodial players, for example? And last but not least, I want to talk about why we are not in a bull run yet, and what will trigger the next bull run. There's so many things on the horizon, like the ETF, 9 ETFs that are yet to be approved from very, gigantic financial institutions. There's the halving coming up. There's presidential candidates in different big countries that are very Bitcoin friendly and about to be elected. There's so much going on, yet the price doesn't move. And so why are we not seeing a bull run yet? And when will we see one? That's kind of these are the topics that I would suggest, but obviously in the end we can talk about whatever wherever it will lead us. The main thing is that we have amazing speakers here, and the rest will certainly follow. Cool. So I want to start asking Jeff. You are obviously a very experienced entrepreneur, board member, and investor, and you decided to raise a venture fund beginning of this year, I think, and you already did, you screened hundreds of companies and you invested in a couple of them, including us. And you are doing this all based on this Bitcoin only narrative. So why, for you, is being Bitcoin only a good strategy? From like a legal or business or tech or whatever ethics point of view, why does it make sense, you think, for a company to be Bitcoin only? And do you think this Bitcoin only industry will grow, and how will it grow in the next 10 years?
I think first off is most people will chase where the puck is right now instead of where the puck is going. And where the puck is going is Bitcoin only. I believe that an entire financial system is going to be built on top of essentially a peer-to-peer internet backed that is Bitcoin. And that transition is going to take a long time, but and most of the world doesn't see how big that transition is. But why? Why? Because it's actually the biggest thing you could do today that actually is the most capital efficient and helps create the world that you want to create. So that's the why. I saw. If I dig into that a little bit though, when I say most people don't see that, or most people don't, when people are hurting financially and everything else, they look for kind of hot money or games and everything else. And the entire world rests on a financial system where trade between humans, where a small number of humans gets to manipulate money and everybody else has to pay the consequences. That won't work long term. It won't look like that. And I'm going to say this is important. If Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure, which I think it will, because we will make sure it does. In other words, if the core protocol doesn't change to be able to do something else because of incentives, if that security, if that decentralization security remains, which I'll do everything to fight for, then, and I'm sure many others will on this call, then it is inevitable that Bitcoin reprices the entire global system. And the companies that are building on top of Bitcoin are going to help accelerate that happening by bringing on more Bitcoiners and building a new transition.
So what, in your opinion, will happen with all the rest? Like all these plus 20,000, other altcoins, crypto projects, blockchain, like what's gonna happen with that?
They will all go to zero. Some of them may take longer to go to zero, but they will all go to zero. I've yet to see an economically rational project that blockchain needed in a database, because it costs more to run a database, other than the decentralized and security. That is the innovation. Everything else can move to layer 2 and 3. And so because people are looking this at it, some people are looking at it as a coin. Some people are looking at it as a quick financial flip. Holding it and then selling it for fiat currency which is being eroded. It's to me, it's insane when this is a protocol. And the base layer of the protocol is decentralized and secure, and there's nothing that anyone in the world can do to stop that from, essentially, my thesis that I talk about prices coming down, prices falling to the marginal cost of production, which is the world we should be living in a free market, if money wasn't manipulated. Then if Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure, then it is measuring the world that I described. In other words, everybody who's holding Bitcoin is and measuring their world in Bitcoin is already living in the future where prices fall every year. And more people are going to join that future every day. And so that's what's happening. And nothing has changed in my thesis. Nothing has changed in Bitcoin. Nothing. It's just gotten more people joining, intransigent minority driving this, which means politicians have to keep it. Pretty soon you won't be able to be elected without be able to be elected if you're not a Bitcoin, if you're not for Bitcoin. And so you can see this moving, and it's repricing the existing system rather than the other way. I think, Julian, you and I have talked about this before, but because most people are measuring the system from the system, they can't see that. And they're measuring the price of Bitcoin from the fiat that is being devalued. And if you measure in Bitcoin, you'll see what I'm saying is true, that prices fall virtually every year.
That's fascinating. I'm looking forward how this is really going to play out. It's going to be wild. Block trainer, aka Roman, you are also active as an entrepreneur yourself. You have built your own business around your brand and your content. You're a very active YouTuber. You educated probably thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands people on Bitcoin, and you're strictly Bitcoin only for a long time now. And you also started to kind of be an investor and a contributor to companies and a partner to companies in the Bitcoin only ecosystem. What is your take on how can these companies be successful in this Bitcoin only industry, and what made you successful? Because you started, not like at the very beginning, you started Multicoin, you were educating about different things, and then you turned Bitcoin only, and only that's when actually you really turned. You really, everything really took off for you. So what are maybe the success factors as a Bitcoin only player in this industry to become really big?
Yeah, thank you, Julian. Hello together. So I think Bitcoin teaches us some fundamental, very important things, like quality is much more important, like quantity. And I think in the end, Bitcoiners understand the economic part best. Like, yeah, they're altcoiners, shitcoiners, they want to make fiat money, but they don't realize that nothing of this is really worthful, or nothing of this is really needed by people. It's just one more gambling thing. And over the years, I've learned this the hard way, like with partners, with friends, with company members, which are not the Bitcoin only, which don't understand Bitcoin only. And all the time when this happened, I realized, it makes problems to work with people which are not involved like this, like me. And I realized that my best friends are Bitcoiners now. So friends I had before, but also new friends. And I realized that the topics I'm talking about with them are so deep and so more fundamental in every part of topics you can talk about, not only money or so. It's about physics, it's about IT, so like software engineering, or I don't know, right? And in the end, so I've learned I only want to work with Bitcoin only companies and Bitcoin only people, because it's just it's less stressful. It's more with the view on a long run, not the short run, not the fast money. It's more building something the society really needs and really want, and understanding what people really want. So I think Bitcoin is the hardest proof that the Austrian economics are right. Like, economic things can't be planned from a central party like the state or a central bank. So the people are deciding what they want. Like, everybody has a priority list in his head, and at one time Bitcoin is coming up on this priority list and will change every other priority part of your list in your head. And if this moment happens, everything else is worthless. Like, Bitcoin is the hardest proof of having something in your pocket, like having your work time, your lifetime saved in a good. And so I've decided to work with Bitcoin only companies and people, and it was the best thing I could do, because the focus on Bitcoin makes you, or let's so you realize when you focus on Bitcoin that everything else is just noise, and the focus on Bitcoin allows you to bring quality that you can't bring if noise is running or disturbing your ideas, your thoughts, and all the stuff. So yeah, Bitcoin only is a decision which can make your life better in all way.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to how your journey is moving on with this laser focus. Maybe Joe or anyone in the mix here. What, from a regulatory point of view, do you think is going to change, and like how will this affect this separation between Bitcoin and crypto? I mean, we are seeing movements mainly from the US now, from the SEC. They basically asked Coinbase to stop trading everything but Bitcoin. Obviously, Coinbase is going to court. XRP, Ripple is going to court, back and forth about whether or not there's security. But that actually, the SEC made it pretty clear already that everything except every crypto except Bitcoin is a security and requires a security dealership license, and therefore basically all these exchanges now should be stopped from trading these securities, these altcoins, these shitcoins. Do you guys think this will actually play out like this? Like, will this go through court? And what will the world look like in the next couple of years if that really advances like this? Will this be crazy good for Bitcoin? Will the cryptos and shitcoins find other ways? And kind of, I'm super interested in learning more on how you think about this. And I don't know, maybe Joe, you've maybe covered this on Cointelegraph as a journalist, this topic.
Sure, thanks, Julian. And I do appreciate the irony of taking part in a Bitcoin-only space while working for, Cointelegraph, which obviously covers the entire crypto space. I mean, in the sort of preamble to your question there, you illustrated the SEC stance on these things, and it just comes across as completely confused, doesn't it? On the one hand, you have these private meetings between Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, and the head honchos at the SEC, where, according to the Financial Times, he was told to delist every other, shitcoin on the exchange and only, trade Bitcoin because that's the only one that isn't a security. and yet you also have these, the clampdown, was it 2 months ago now or 3 months ago now from the SEC, which basically explained everything was security except for a few tokens. Like Ethereum wasn't really noted, but Ethereum staking was. So I think in the US right now there needs to be more clarity. I think that's what everyone in the space is sort of calling for. With regards to the future, I mean, yeah, the idealist and the optimist in me would love a future in which everyone understands the importance of Bitcoin and that we all come around to this moment. But that might happen naturally as opposed to it being due to regulation. Harking back to what Jeff was saying earlier, if this is going to be this moment where we transition to a brand new monetary standard, then everything sort of will die because of that, right? Because it will be built atop Bitcoin. That doesn't mean to say there won't be, scams and shitcoins maybe on Bitcoin, because that could theoretically be possible with, tokens coming to Bitcoin. But at least it will be built on this sound monetary standard. But again, I'm not super into the weeds with the technicalities of it all. In Europe, I mean, you'll know this, Julian, and the guys at Relai better than I will, maybe Lena as well. Knut and Giacomo are, of course, in the audience too, so maybe they'd be able to comment a bit more on the European standpoint, as I don't really spend a lot of time with that, despite the fact that I do live in Europe. So maybe could I sort of defer to Giacomo or Knut for this one?
Of course. Who wants to jump in?
Well, since I was mentioned, I can also, hi everybody, first of all. I can probably bring a somewhat different perspective and somewhat contrarian perspective to this point about regulation helping companies to get Bitcoin only. I think that in the short term, of course, reducing the amount of crazy crypto bullshit is a net positive for everybody. But on the long term, reducing noise because of some kind of centralized political imposition will only make things worse. Basically, instead of giving the market time to distinguish signal from noise, and instead of giving the market time to understand why, from a theoretical point of view, there is no way to replicate digital scarcity. So the point is that you can only discover digital scarcity once. You cannot replicate that an infinite amount of time. And then when you try to replicate it, the only way you can convince the market to not dilute the value among 1 billion of infinite supply coins, but only on Bitcoin and your shitcoin, the only way is to make your shitcoin at least 10,000 better than Bitcoin. But you can't, because Bitcoin is already built on very, very subtle and very, very delicate set of trade-offs. So when you try to change one in order to try to become 10 times better than Bitcoin, you will definitely lose the others. And also you will have to start from scratch with no price discovery, with no liquidity. And lack of liquidity will hurt any kind of niche use case you try to cultivate. Like you want to do privacy, but if there is no liquidity, there is no basically an onset to your privacy shitcoin. You may want to do like a fast and cheap transfers, but if there is no liquidity, you need people to sell Bitcoin for the shitcoin and then to transact and then to go back to Bitcoin, which is also a scalability and price and the velocity bottleneck. So you cannot basically reproduce this kind of digital scarcity, and any kind of endeavor that you can do by printing money, by printing new token, you can do it better just building on top of Bitcoin, reusing the digital scarcity that was already discovered in a neutral and peer-to-peer and decentralized way without creating your own kind of private money. So the market is going to understand these slowly with a lot of trial and error processes, and having politicians, including politicians like Gary Gensler, that were basically pals with Sam Bankman-Fried in scamming people with FTX shitcoin operations, will not help things. It's like when you try to educate people on alcohol, prohibition in America created way more alcoholism and poisoned drinks than everything else. It's all the same thing. So I think that in the long term, this will be a bad news for education, but still eventually Bitcoin will still win, because it's just a point of economical logic. So eventually, digital scarcity will win over proliferation of infinite supply of shitcoins. Also because all your incentives are broken, as Block Trainer said before. The point of staying Bitcoin only is focus. When you try to disperse your energy in following the last crypto fed, you may try to navigate it just to make some money, but then you will eventually be your focus will be destroyed. Think about, I don't know, a hardware company that instead of just doing Bitcoin hardware wallet now have to follow 1 million of shitcoins, cannot even cover multi-sig use cases. So now they have to basically use central servers to do the multi-sig because all these shitcoins are single sign. So it's a loss of focus, tremendous loss of focus. Of course, in the short term, we are there are mixed feelings, because I am certainly happy that I was intellectually gratified about telling my clients for years that getting into shitcoin was also long-term a legal risk, because Bitcoin is something. So I don't think that Bitcoin will. Bitcoin only company will face some kind of political risk sometimes, because the point of Bitcoin is to fight the monopoly on money of the Federal Reserve. Basically, this is not a fight that will just go down like a picnic, like a friendly discussion. This will go down probably with a lot of bloodshed, like the battle between the dollar and gold in the 30s. Basically went to the extreme of gold confiscation from private citizens in the U.S. So eventually, being Bitcoin only will not preserve our centralized companies from state censorship or state confiscation or limitation of the things we can do. But at least the legal risk is again focused on something manageable. So we know that we are competing with the Fed. So we know that they would like to shut down Bitcoin. They cannot, because Bitcoin, unlike e-gold, is decentralized. So they will try to stop all the centralized bottlenecks like exchanges or wallet producers. So we will have to fight. But if you fight on one thing, you can concentrate your effort, you can concentrate your strategies, you can basically focus, and you can basically resist more. You can create more escape strategies, more regulatory arbitrage. If you try to follow the crypto Fed, that will include any kind of security fraud, any kind of Ponzi scheme, any kind of misleading marketing or false marketing, any kind of pseudo technical bullshit in order to lure retail investors in. So if you go there, there is a uncapped, there is basically a unbounded legal risk. If you stay Bitcoin only, we will still have legal risk, but it will be bounded. It will be in a sphere which is predictable in a way. So it's certainly better. So I'm not happy about I'm happy that more and more companies are going Bitcoin only. I'm not happy if that happens because of state interference in the market trial and error process. It would be better if people understood, but that's also happening. Like, I don't know, let me mention some names. Good companies like Trezor started with a lot of shitcoin support, and then they went more and more Bitcoin only, at least in the events they support, and they have a firmware which is Bitcoin only. Companies like CoinKite, they were supporting Litecoin, now they are Bitcoin only. Company like HODL, they were also doing Litecoin or Monero stuff, and now they're at least as a focus, they are going more and more Bitcoin only. So this like Bitcoin Magazine started just like Cointelegraph that Joe was mentioning before, but then they went kind of Bitcoin only, with maybe the exception of this latest ordinal bullshit. And so there is a trend which is already there for reasons of market discovery, which is positive. I think that the political imposition will probably be a short-term good, but a long-term long-term damage to the discovery of why Bitcoin only. In a way, it's interesting. Like Julian knows that one of the reasons I got interested in Relai many years ago was Bitcoin, that it was a Bitcoin only company. The other was that there was a way, at least at least below the limits, to buy Bitcoin without explicit KYC, which I think is very, very good. And I think it's like symmetrical. If you try to stay peer-to-peer KYC free, non-custodial, so if you try to avoid state intervention in identity management and user de-anonymization, then you save money in the short term, but then the government will eventually attack you and try to restrict you. They will try to regulate you. But now you save money because you don't need to sustain a KYC department. If you go Bitcoin only and you don't follow the shitcoin feds, you lose some money in the short term because you cannot, like, imagine a hardware wallet, which is Bitcoin only, will have to make money only selling hardware wallets. And there are so many people that can buy an hardware wallet. So it's a business which is more challenging. If you just make money, getting money from shitcoin scammers in order to integrate the shitcoin, so if that becomes the business model, during alt seasons, you can make a lot of money short term. But then long term, we will have more regulatory trouble because, again, your risk becomes unbounded. If we want to challenge the Federal Reserve and the IMF and whatever to a geopolitical level, we already have a lot of regulatory problems to face, to prepare for. That's a lot of work to do. If you add to that also trying to work around the SEC and try to basically take part to every kind of Ponzi scheme and security fraud, that becomes even harder. So I will not cheer for the like compulsory Bitcoin only new age, but I will definitely cheer for more and more company organically discovering that Bitcoin only is a very efficient and very productive and very incentive aligning kind of trend to follow.
I really like a lot of things that you said there. Mainly also this that it's all about focus, right? And I think that's also a major success factor if you remain true to the Bitcoin purpose, the Bitcoin values, which is, you know, Bitcoin only, as low KYC as possible, non-custodial, you know, taking control of your own future. That's also rewarded in kind of legal and compliance and regulatory perspective, because, for example, what's happening with Mika now in Europe, and that we obviously see that firsthand at Relai, is that every company will need to get a Mika license if they want to be active in Bitcoin or crypto, for that matter, in several European countries, in all the 40 EU countries. And so you will need to do KYC and stuff like that on your customers. So you will need to do a lot. And other than that, you're just not going to be allowed to be operational. The more, though, you are Bitcoin only, and the more you are non-custodial, and the more you are peer-to-peer, instead of being like, you know, the major exchanges today, altcoin first or crypto first, and custodial and very centralized players, the more they will suffer. I mean, they will suffer more, and the more you are true to the Bitcoin values, peer-to-peer, non-custodial, and so forth, the less you will suffer. Which is actually interesting as well, that we not only did we position ourselves like that for kind of ideological reasons, but in the end it also really makes sense business-wise, and that's why I think it's a really good decision for a lot of companies to be and stay Bitcoin only and non-custodial, because they will be not left alone, but at least you know, really not on the focus of the radar of the regulators. They will be able to offer better products, better UX UI, better onboarding experience, better user experience, and so forth, because they are less regulated, because they are less risky for the users. They are not, you know, costing the funds, and they are not offering Ponzi schemes and other speculative assets and securities. And so forth. So that's, I really like what you said, is that the market will sort it out as well, because of this. If companies and entrepreneurs start understanding that Bitcoin only is really having these advantages as well. And I also like
have a
what
question,
you said.
Julian.
Yes, please, Linda.
And hi. So just to like play devil's advocate for a bit, how safe do you feel in that? Because I agree with everything you said. Personally, yeah, my company is European, but I don't offer financial products, right? So really my only touching points from a regulatory standpoint are pretty much commerce, e-commerce products, and Bitcoin related, just really when it comes to payments and banks not wanting to give us bank accounts, right? But what Giacomo said, in the end, you're challenging the monetary world order, right? With Bitcoin. So yes, for now it's great to see a less regulatory focus on Bitcoin only companies. How safe do you feel in that staying that way? Like do you think that could change in the long term?
I think Jeff should answer that.
Yeah, yeah, and Lena, let me jump into that, and because I have maybe a different take than Giacomo, but close. I think you have to move up a level, and you have to say, kind of, why are we all Bitcoiners, and what's happening here, and you think about why is an honest ledger that runs the world, that connects everybody, a bad thing? And so remember, everything else has to fight what I just said. The entire world construct has to fight, why is an honest ledger bad for society? And so the entire structure we live in doesn't have truth on its side. It has dishonesty. And the money that comes to fund that dishonesty comes from the system of dishonesty. And more people are waking up to that every day. And so the centralizing function that drives all the power differential in the world, and we call them elites. They should be called thieves. And so that theft from other people on this planet comes from that dishonest ledger, and that's the world we live in today, and it has to get worse. It has to get a lot worse. It has to centralize to keep things in order, and that has to block communication channels. It has to essentially take any centralized service, and it has to, if Microsoft owns GitHub and code is on GitHub, then the U.S. government could go and say, I don't want this code on GitHub anymore, and they'd have to take it down. And that's why kind of Bitcoin and Nostr and everything else is developing the other way. Now, what does that look like? An honest ledger that's developing the other way, driven bottom up by people. What it looks like is, even if every government, in the end, it looks like governments are way smaller and they serve us. That's what it looks like. On the way through, it looks like some governments and some people understand that, and some don't. And there's this fight that Giacomo talks about. But the fight will be won by the decentralization because it's in us. It's and so every nation. So if every other country said we're against this, all the Bitcoin companies would move to El Salvador or the next country that is going to make Bitcoin legal, because it's in people's best interests. And remember, people change the laws to be able to support what they want, and the laws are impacted by money. And so today the laws are enacted by people that are driving those laws around broken money and changing the laws to be able to protect the existing system. That is changing because more and more people are starting to wake up to an honest ledger would run the world better. And those people largely on this call, but lots of others too, you have no idea how high this goes. In our fund, some of the top names in finance, some of the top names in, some people that you don't know are Bitcoiners, that are hardcore Bitcoiners, advocating everything possible to move this. So it's going to move, no matter what. It's inevitable, but it's going to be really. Some countries are going to win, and they're going to embrace this. Some countries are going to lose by not embracing it. Some companies are going to win. Some companies are going to lose. Some companies are going to make a bunch of mistakes. I just know for me why I'm in it. I'm Bitcoin only. This is where we're going. And I'm going to do everything in my power to influence the time speed of this, because it's the right thing for humanity.
Yeah, just to
sorry,
clarify
Giacomo.
my point a little bit. Oh, no, sorry, Lina. I basically agree with Jeff. I think my pessimism is more about timing. It's like if you are in Russia in 1920, you know that market forces are good for humanity and price discovery is good for humanity, and they can manage stuff better than the Soviet. And you know that eventually the Soviet will fail because truth is on the side of market forces and price discovery. But then you will have to wait for 70 years for that to happen. So sometimes short-term dynamic can be very, very nasty before the truth wins. I have no doubt that we win in the end. But
Just adding to that, though, the beautiful thing about this, which will speed this timing, it's not going to be tomorrow, but the beautiful thing about this is going to speed this timing is people with Bitcoin have the flexibility to move, and they're going to move to places there. And
I
so,
agree. And also,
in past, a country could run financial repression on you, and you had no place to go. You couldn't leave. This is different today.
yeah, the cycles are getting faster in time. That's true. So we will probably not have to wait 70 years. And as Jeff said, space is also a different matter. So you can do geographical arbitrage way better now that you could back then. And Bitcoin is a key component in that. But still, I will not. My point was just not to fall under the naive impression that regulators will help us fighting scams. Like the SEC is responsible for many of the scams that exist because they basically give free passes to the friends to scam people, and they keep people out of stock investment, incentivizing shitcoin business. So the SEC is not our friend. But in the end, we agree that truth will win. And not only that, I also agree with Jeff that while we do this fight, Bitcoin only is the way to go. Also because we will have a fight to fight. So it's better to focus all the strength into what matters, which is privacy, which is freedom of the users, the freedom of transaction, fighting censorship. So wasting time and effort into protecting Ponzi schemes is definitely a very, very, very bad strategy. So in the end, practically, I think we agree perfectly.
This is Alex speaking. Just a quick remark. I think that there are two scenarios possible. The regulatory fight that tries to kill the access to Bitcoin and try to reduce the movement or maybe even kill it. So just like the US did in 1935 when they outlawed gold, and it could be coordinated in the EU and US. So that would be a very negative scenario. I think also there could be a very positive scenario, positive in a way that one of the larger countries, maybe the US or Europe or China or other, one by one, adopt Bitcoin, and just like El Salvador, show a good performance, show an improvement of the quality of life, the economy, the standard of life, satisfaction of the people, and I think anything between those scenarios, very negative and very positive, is possible. And I think our mandate, our task as Bitcoiner is to push it towards the positive scenario. So it's just not happening by itself. We have influence on that, and I think we should do everything we can do to push for a positive adoption scenario among the countries in the world.
Yeah, I think it's also like what you say is game theory, right? In the end, if there's a government that doesn't like Bitcoin, like let's say, for example, in Turkey, they don't want you using Bitcoin for payments, right? Then those who can afford it, which is going to be more and more people in the Bitcoin space in the long term, and companies in the Bitcoin space, they're going to go elsewhere because there's always going to be a country, a government, a region that welcomes Bitcoin and Bitcoiners, right? The thing I just have, and we're pretty much in line with what you said, Giacomo, was I don't think all regulators are evil and whatnot, and I don't want to generalize this, right? But I don't think it is, I don't like that we would celebrate regulation when it weeds out the shit coins or whatnot. Obviously that's great because it's common sense, right? But there's nothing that wouldn't say they wouldn't come for Bitcoin later. It's just a low-hanging fruit, you know. And so especially looking at many countries in the EU, they don't exactly have a great track record of not trying to acquire control in many ways, right? So I see going to different countries that in different parts of the world there's a very different approach to life, and the EU, in my experience, there's, regulatorily speaking, likes control, right? Whereas in other places you tend to have more freedoms. And that's just why I would say I wouldn't feel so safe from a regulatory standpoint. But yes, we can move, we can vote with our feet, and we will. And that is why Bitcoin will win in the end. And it will drive even governments, even regulators like that, into then having to say, like, oops, if we want a piece of this cake, actually, we have to adjust. And then you get to the point where you say, oh, the government has to serve the people, which is how it should be. But it got lost along the way. Well, thanks to our monetary system.
Yep. One thing on this, like, I don't think that regulatory the regulation is a problem right now, because they focus on scams and so on. So in the end, I agree to Giacomo. I don't think we need regulators for being humans and making our own decisions. I think the market will decide. But at this point, I don't fear regulation, because Bitcoin is like a Trojan horse, and every time they don't focus on Bitcoin, it's good for us. So let them fight the altcoins. It's not our problem, so it's not our business. We can be happy because they don't focus on Bitcoin, and I think that's probably okay.
Yeah, and
yeah, for sure.
Maybe not every country, as Jeff said, needs to adopt. Like there's only a little one needed, a little ones like El Salvador, like Madeira, for example. And I see Knut hasn't had the opportunity to talk yet, so I really want to give him quickly the word, because Knut, you are, for example, together with Jeff as well, working on Free Madeira, and Madeira and El Salvador and a couple of other countries, maybe soon Argentina, if their Bitcoin-friendly presidential candidate is elected, will follow, right? So maybe this is enough. This is like the first energy for the first steps from these countries that will make this difference that we just talked about. And then, as Lena said, we will vote with our feet. How do you see this, Knut?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'd like to expand on a couple of the points that Jeff and Giacomo mentioned, and maybe provide a slightly different perspective. As Giacomo said, the discovery of absolute scarcity cannot be replicated. But to go a bit deeper there, the thing that was discovered was resistance to replicability. And the shitcoins, you can view them as attempts at replicating resistance to replicability. And what happens is it goes up and then it plummets and it goes down forever, because you cannot replicate it. It has the first mover advantage, and what it is an agreement on a fixed set of rules, which we converge around, because every Bitcoiner sees that this thing is working, and then we realize that it enables this absolute scarcity, which is also infinitely divisible on layer 2 and layer 3 at least, and also teleportable to anywhere in the world. In other words, it's perfect, damn near perfect money. And any sound person wants that. And all the problems we're talking about here with the regulatory risks and stuff, they're only problems in the old world, and they're not problems on a Bitcoin standard. So if you do your business in Bitcoin and you accept Bitcoin for your goods and services one way or another, like, as long as you don't touch the banking system, you're fine. No one's going to come after you. You're living in the future, and all the problems are in the past already. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, as the saying goes. So the more you choose to live in Bitcoin, on Bitcoin, with Bitcoin, and as Jeff said, it is us, and Bitcoin is literally us, because the information about the Bitcoin is the Bitcoin, so it lives within us. Not only if you memorize your seed phrase, but all of it is just keeping a secret. All of the miners, all of the computers involved, all of the nodes, they're just software. And what is software? What is a computer? It's just a fancy abacus to help us calculate stuff. So it's just an extension of our brain. So at its core, Bitcoin lives within all Bitcoiners. So all Bitcoiners are incentivized to help one another and trade with one another and be fucking awesome to one another. And we also have the incentive to help Bitcoin succeed. So all the incentives are aligned in our favor. And there is nothing that any evil actor can do to stop that. Because all the evil actors and all the misguided actors and all the I don't like calling politicians evil, because I think that's the system that sort of makes them do evil things rather than them being evil by default. Many of them probably think that they do good things, but as we know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So the project in Madeira, for instance, the reason that we chose to work with the president there is that hyper-Bitcoinization can either be a smooth ride or a violent one. And if we choose the smooth route, where we orange pill the people in the parliaments so they're on our side already, then, well, less violence into the future. But the point I want to make is, like, you choose to which extent you live in the future and to which extent you live in the past. And the future is us. It's literally us.
Yeah, when I think about regulation, I just go through just this really simple thought experiment with the world we live in today. All regulation, all of it, to protect you from losing your money, is on top of a system designed to steal your money. How could it look any different than it looks today? And hiring more people to be able to force regulation on top of a system that is based on dishonest ledger only makes it stronger. And that's why I say it. So I just where I say I don't tune it out completely, because we're invested in companies and we have to move these companies if they have to be moved, and we have to be inside and understand all of this happening. But do I worry about this at all long term? Like, do I actually worry about it actually changing the course of Bitcoin? No, I don't. Because every time you say what I just said, more people wake up to the fact that they're living in a lie, and they start to investigate what's happening on Bitcoin. And that's what everyone on this call is already there, and that's what Knut just said. As they investigate Bitcoin at a deeper level, an honest ledger that we control, people control, governments in turn get a lot smaller, and they serve us. It's just it's going to be a natural transition. Now, it is going to be messy on the way through, and most people on the planet don't see what we're talking about right now. So what they do is they feed the system. They actually make it stronger by yelling at the system and taking sides against this coin or this regulator or this rate, thinking that I can solve this by putting a new regulator in place on top of that dishonest ledger. And it's pretty obvious that won't work. And it'll only make what we're doing stronger as people start to understand it. But if you just deal kind of in first principles and you take the high road, this is a really hard fight to win from a system of lies.
Just a quick reply there to add a point about why we agree to this fixed set of rules. It's because we've done the work and we know that we can check the system ourselves to see that it is more expensive to break the rules than to just follow them and just trade with one another and be awesome to one another. So that's it. When we see when it clicks, when you see that the system is more expensive to cheat than to just follow the rules, that there's no incentive left to try to cheat the system. You just have to surrender to it because it's better on all levels for everyone.
I totally. I mean, we all agree that I think in the end, a sound money system based on Bitcoin will be superior to anything mankind has seen before. The big question really is, how do we get there, and how messy does it really get? Because if it get, I mean, the justification of the reserve banks to print money really is to not keep this. I mean, keep the system running. Maybe that's one justification, but the other justification really is to avoid mass unemployment, complete meltdown of the system, riots on the street, and we won't benefit from a superior monetary standard based on Bitcoin if the path towards that new world is filled with bodies on the street. So the question really is, how do we make it work so that the transition is somehow as smooth as it can be?
May I
Alex, that question can't actually be answered, because when you're dealing with an economy or human body, or you're dealing with a chaotic system instead of a linear system, and there's so many inputs to that, and depending where you are and the time you are, it actually can't be answered. What can you do? What can you individually do instead of what everyone else does to be able to help that? That's what you should ask. And individually, you could spend more time in Bitcoin. You could invest in Bitcoin companies. You can talk about it. You can spend your Bitcoin and then replace. You can live on a Bitcoin standard now. All of these things accelerate the path. Building companies that provide very real value to other people looking to be able to connect that value is like explaining the internet to people in the early 90s and what it was going to do would be a tough road. Developing the iPhone that just makes it easy with no instruction manual on how to use the iPhone brings on billions of people. So what's happening now is for a long time, Bitcoin, all you could do is hold it and get wealthy or protect your wealth from getting eroded. That's all you could do. And so a lot of people built alternatives that they said, I'm going to build a better Bitcoin, a faster Bitcoin, and everything else. Of course the market is going to do that. And they misread what it actually is, that base layer. But now what's happening is, and I see this from a whole bunch of people that were in this other space that are moving back to Bitcoin, because now you can build real value. And the type of value that's emerging and what's going to happen on top of this to make it way easier to hopefully bring on billions of people before they're destroyed in this existing system. That's the race we're on. What can each individual person do on that? I've said this multiple times, but I felt before I started the fund, I was a hypocrite. I knew all of this. I knew where it was going. I held a bunch of Bitcoin, and I invested 90% of my time in the existing fiat world on all the boards and everything else. And I had to, when I realized that, that's why I started the fund. I had to move my time to spend more time in the world I wanted to see. And I think each one of us has that ability to do so. We don't have to just wait. And as more people understand their power in making the change just emerges, and more people are helped out in that change. It will be messy. It will be messy. Today, if we went into a deflationary spiral, which isn't out of the question, what's happening in China right now, what's happening all over the world right now, people will be begging for more printing of money, and they'll make the state stronger. So either way, the $400 trillion of debt in the world today is already insolvent. Just most people are acting like it isn't insolvent, and they're paying for it through their real wages being taken away each year by more and more. At some point, a lot of people are going to get hurt by that. And the most likely course is proxy wars and wars expanding, because too many people think there's a solve within the system and this person is going to save them. And they transfer their individual power to that person. And their individual rights and freedoms go away as they get taken to war. That is the most likely. I wish I didn't have to say that. The probable path. It's why I wrote my book. What changes that path? All of us. Every single person. Every driving that. It is what Bitcoin is. It's us.
Yeah,
totally agree.
To add to that answer, like if I try to answer the question you posed, it's like you cannot know how messy it will get, but you know that the more you live in Bitcoin with Bitcoiners on Bitcoin in the Bitcoin space, the less messy it's going to get for you. So there's a relationship there, and also the flip side of that coin, as Jeff alluded to, is that you simultaneously take away power from the old system by being in this Bitcoin shadow economy, or whatever you may call it. This is sort of what happened in Czechoslovakia when they broke out of communism, right? If I get my history right here, that a shadow society was built from the ground up, and eventually that overthrew the old regime. And this is the way we do it. We ignore the noise coming from above, and we build from below.
But I just want to add to that too, and because I just think it's important for Bitcoiners too, and every single person should react the way they want to. But if your reaction to what you want is actually making the existing system stronger by yelling at it or saying it, then maybe there's a different way you could do that to actually build this faster. So, and because the natural thing is to look at WEF, which is like it's hard to imagine that we have 1,000 person or an organization funded by 1,000 of the biggest companies in the world influencing policy around the world. It's hard to imagine. But I know actually some individual people who go to that conference each year, and they don't know that they're part of a construct. So I could yell at my friend and say you're a horrific person and everything else, or I could and what they would do is just tune me out and not listen, or I could chat with them in a different way, and all of a sudden they open their eyes to see what this is. And we think, and I see this all over the place in Twitter, but we think individually we're the actor in our own movie. But when we look at other people, we say, oh, they're part of that company, so all of those people are exactly the same. That outgroup bias that we had cast on them. I can tell you, guaranteed, because I know some of the people in some of these other things, and they're the strongest Bitcoin activists around, working from the inside out to be able to move this. Yet what Twitter would look like is all of those people are bad. That entire group of people are bad people. It's just not true. Individually, we all make a difference, and every company looks like a whole bunch of individuals as well.
Absolutely agree on that. What amazing points! I could listen for forever. One thing is that you said we obviously have an incentive or motive or reason to try to make this transition, smooth and hopeful for everyone. As smooth as possible. Do you think this trend of presidential candidates outspoken being Bitcoin and Bitcoin only proponents, like in the US, Robert F. Kennedy, and in Argentina, Javier Milei, and I think there are many more potential presidential candidates also in Mexico and other South American and global countries. Do you think that's an important step towards this smooth transition? Is this positive?
It's positive, and so interesting fact. I was RFK Jr.'s first Lightning transaction, so his first personal Lightning transaction was from me. But on that, it actually doesn't. So the intransigent minority will carry that. Bitcoiners, we don't care, and it actually doesn't matter a politician, right? Eventually this is going to move, and the only politicians that'll get elected will be Bitcoiners because the people will demand it. And you're already seeing a large enough base in Bitcoin. Elections are swung by tiny amounts. And if you lose that Bitcoin vote, I don't know if you can win an election, or if certainly maybe you can in the next election. The one after that, you won't be able to. So you're going to have politicians racing to you and trying to get elected by forming to you, but that'll give the people more power, and the politicians, once that's chosen, whether they're a bad politician or a good politician, it won't matter, because the next step is going to just enforce that. It's going to reinforce that, and there's going to be more of us in that. So it's just a path, Julian.
So yeah, I think in the end, everything we see right now is that more people understand this, and I think even for countries, Bitcoin has a priority at one point. We see that the dollar narrative dies, like even China and others try to bring a new currency or new world currency. We don't know if they're really successful with this, but we see the dollar narrative dies, and the people realize we can use something like the dollar, or another currency is controlled by one central party, or we can use a currency which no one controls. And in the end, this is Bitcoin. And I don't think that this is just a hype on the for politicians. It's more like they realize that Bitcoin can help us a lot. If we see, or if we take a look at China, for example, Hong Kong or Shenzhen, these zones were not controlled by the state for, 20 years, and they had a phenomenal economic rising, and which are the power of China today, based on a free market. And now China took over with the socialist system over this two areas like Hong Kong and Shenzhen, and now the economic rising is stopped, or degrowth. And we see, if a market is free, people will have better lives, will invent better technologies, and you have more value in the end for the people. So that's a thing which could be useful for a politician to make the life for your people better, and being loved by your society. And I think this is one reason for the President Bukele in El Salvador, for Javier Milei in Argentina, or even for Robert F. Kennedy, to realize, you can use this for yourself. And even if no one of them will be a president in the next area or in the next time frame, now this is a topic which everyone is talking about, and it will never go away. It's like an idea. If an idea is born, it's now there, right? And it's a step-by-step development. And even what Alex feared, like if the fiat system dies, how much damage this will create. I think in the end, this is a point where more people realize that they need an alternative. Jeff talked about this in the beginning, and absolutely with him. Let the system die. With all steps, the system getting more worse. More people are interested in a solution like Bitcoin, and I think we're on a good way. So.
Yeah, let me try to play the bad cop again, even if I don't like cops very much. So I think that I'm less optimistic about a strict relationship between the will of the people and the result of elections. I think that democratic election game theoretically are mostly a game where everybody tries to live on expenses of everybody else. So they tend to produce very collectivistic results. But even if for some reason the incentives align to actually elect officials to implement good policies and not bad policies, even in that case, usually the incumbent power will fix elections with the media. They will just create a media narrative where Kennedy is a criminal, Bukele is a dictator, and so on. Milei will receive the same treatment. Even if that doesn't work, I think they will just fix election in a more practical way, just changing the votes, because I'm absolutely certain that they are not, in no country in the world, the government are, the powers of the government do not directly have a possibility to fix the election. But I agree that in some countries, so I think that nation states today, when they relate with Bitcoin, they have basically two kinds of relationship. One is negative, because Bitcoin, if used by their people, Bitcoin will reduce the power of censorship, money confiscation, trade control, capital flight. They will lose censorship power, and they will also lose inflation power, because they can keep printing fiat. But if savers and investors, they will basically move wealth to Bitcoin, this fiat will just inflate into nothing without extracting money with the cantillon tax. So Bitcoin is bad for a government, because it takes away two of the most powerful things a government do as a job, and modern nation state do, which is censorship, also political censorship. Think about blocking payment to Julian Assange or other kind of political censorship. So the government will lose censorship power, and most importantly, inflation power. But on the other hand, the government will gain a resistance to censorship by other governments and inflation by other governments. Since the United States of America right now are at the top of the food pyramid of censorship and inflation in all the world, they export inflation in all the rest of the world, and they basically can censor financial transactions anywhere. There is an interesting effect. If you are a nation state, you basically have a ratio. If the damage that Bitcoin will do to your capacity to extract wealth from your citizens via censorship and confiscation and inflation is less than the amount of power you will gain to avoid censorship and inflation from other countries, then you may actually love Bitcoin as a nation state. So I think that's the case for El Salvador. Even if people in El Salvador didn't realize Bitcoin is good, for the nation state of El Salvador, it is good, because they don't have a fiat money they can print, so they just suffer inflation without any local benefit. Same goes for Ecuador, Panama, many republics in Africa. They just have to suffer the euro without any kind of local advantage for the government. And on the other hand, if there is think about Panama, the state of Panama, they don't even tax people very much. They have the canal. They just take the rent from the canal. They don't care for following people to steal money from them via taxation. It's not their business model. Think about most of Dubai Emirates. They don't really tax people to survive, to fund the government. There is some of that, but mostly it's funded by other kind of deals, oil and other things. These kind of governments will have very little to lose from Bitcoin adoption in their country, and they will have a lot to gain in censorship resistance and inflation resistance toward other governments. So I can imagine a lot of South America, a lot of Africa to adopt Bitcoin because the political class love it. This will not include only good nation states. I think that nation states like Iran or North Korea, they are not example of libertarian places. The nation state there is very nasty. But still, if you are North Korea, you don't care very much for the loss of censorship you get on citizens if you can avoid international sanction from the US. So we may have a strange kind of world war Bitcoin where some good and some bad places will just band together because they have more to gain from Bitcoin adoption than to lose. I think that the United States of America, in the US, the Bitcoin defense, the Bitcoin proposition will mostly work for opposition candidates. If you want to point to the flaws of the system, just point to the flaws in abstract is less powerful than to promote and indicate an alternative. And Bitcoin is a great, realistic, working alternative. So if you want to be an opposition candidate in the US, Bitcoin campaign, I think it works great and it will work great for many, many years. If you actually get to the government, I'm way more skeptical because then you have to convince not just the congressmen, but also all the bureaucrats of the deep state or the military. They have to convince everybody living off welfare that if you get back to the federal spending of 1910, basically, which is what the US had before they started messing with money, then everybody will be happy. I mean, the nation will be better, but try to convince Washington, D.C. to get back to a government spending of the beginning of the 20th century, giving away all the welfare spending and all the warfare spending, all the military-industrial complex. What I think could be a little bit better could be a state level, like local level. If you are the governor of Texas, you cannot print money, and you don't usually confiscate or censor international transaction. You don't have a Texas international payment sanction list. So you don't care. So we may have, like we had in immigration policies, in the US now you have sanctuary states, like the federal government will impose a restriction of immigration, but then New York State will say, no, we don't agree, we will just violate this federal law. There may be something similar with money, where I think the politicians at the government in Washington, D.C., they will never really fight to lose their inflation power, because that means shrinking the government budget to the beginning of 20th century levels. What we could see is like local states becoming very Bitcoin friendly in spite of the federal government, I think. Of course, I'm assuming a lot of things, and we don't really know how geopolitics will go.
Yeah, Giacomo, I look at it more like this. I think some of those things could happen. I think about just how many the people listening to this spaces, how many you came into Bitcoin and understand it now at a deep level versus the rest of the population. And that's the same as so in El Salvador. I remember talking to the YPO group, and they were totally against the president of El Salvador because they thought he was a dictator and everything else. And I said, I cannot believe you're against Bitcoin. So, and they said, what's the worst thing about Bitcoin? And I said, people you hate will use it, and they make it stronger for you. That's what's happening. And so because the rules are fixed, and because so each person, let's say RFK doesn't get elected, but he brings on another 1 million Bitcoiners or 500,000 Bitcoiners. A certain portion of those will be long-term holders like us, and will never sell, and they'll make it stronger. And those people will make that network stronger and over. And each person that's driving this is bringing on. We don't know our own impact. We don't know if we made an impact on one person that then brought on 2 million. We don't know, but we do know. We can see that in El Salvador, whether you like Bukele or you don't like Bukele, he's making Bitcoin stronger. And over time, that also removes his power. Unless he's in service of the people. And so that's what the network looks like, no matter what. And it doesn't actually matter where it's coming from, but that's what's going to happen. And the people, like Knut said, people that understand that it's better to work within the system on fair rules for everyone will win more of the system, and the others will get shot out to altcoin schemes and other things, and they'll be flushed. We've seen it in Bitcoin today. Like we see it other, like Hex or whatever. Was a Bitcoiner, decided to do a scam, and now where is he? That's just what it's going to look like. And the long-term holders are going to carry the day, and it's going to keep on moving into the general consciousness.
This sounds all so bullish. So I want to conclude with the question to you guys, and maybe you have 2 or 3 votes for me before we wrap up the session. why the hell, if everything looks so bullish, like presidential candidates getting into more and more power, gaining more and more influence, the inflation is going crazy, and like the fiat monetary system is collapsing. There's, the next halving is coming up very soon. ETFs are going to be, there are 9 ETFs pending currently, and soon there will be several approved by like giant financial institutions. There's so much positivity and so many positive signals out there, yet we are at 30K for already a long time. So I bet a lot of listeners are asking, so when is this bull run coming? What is going to trigger it? Can I have 2 or 3 concluding votes on that?
I can say something to that. I think we are in a double bull market. So first of all, Bitcoin is up 80% from its November lows, which in itself is a bull market. So that's significant. And someone who does DCA starting at the all-time high in November, it's like plus 10, 12 or so percent. So it's up. But the double bull market really is, I think that's at the background of a shrinking money supply, which should be very negative for Bitcoin. And I think we're living in cycles, and on Roman's YouTube channel, I characterized the cycle. It typically goes a year from the all-time high to the all-time low, and then it takes a while, around 2 years, to get back to the original all-time high, and then another year to reach the new all-time high. And I think it was just moving perfectly in the cycle, significantly up from the all-time low. And I think there's quite some negative elements, and I think it's quite positive how Bitcoin is holding up. And there will positive moments kick in, ETFs and further adoption and positive regulation, and of course the halving, and then it will go its course as it did in the last few cycles. And we'll definitely see new all-time highs in the near future, 25, the latest. So I think we are in a bull market.
Yeah, Julian, the question itself is it suggests that the fiat currency is the right measure. And just do a thought experiment and say, if there liquidity, the existing system, maybe not 10,000 times, but almost that, 10,000 times bigger than Bitcoin today, and liquidity of the existing system has a lag effect in the entire market as things either break or lag, or inflation lags kind of the action of liquidity. So now liquidity is getting pulled from the market. Well, generally now it's being added in China, but let's say it's being pulled from the U.S. If that liquidity gets pulled from the U.S. and we go into a deflationary spiral, what do you think commercial real estate's going to do? What do you think real estate's going to do? And if Bitcoin holds, even goes down, the price of assets is going to fall precipitously against Bitcoin, and it's measuring the same thing by staying relative and oil prices falling against it as it would by going up really fast and other prices going up less fast against it. So that's what's happening. It is the new system measuring all prices, and people just can't see that because they're trying to figure out when is it going to go up in my fiat dollars. That's what's happening.
Got it. So by being stable, it's actually going up if you don't measure it by the fiat system.
But if you just play that forward, it won't. So if the existing system started collapsing like that, the next step would be massive liquidity, and then Bitcoin would go in fiat terms to massive highs, and that is coming at some point because the existing system is already insolvent, and without that liquidity it crashes to the ground completely, and the only thing worth anything is Bitcoin. And I suspect governments aren't going to allow that to happen. But if you just measure prices instead of Bitcoin price through an existing fiat lens, well, look at, it's heading all-time highs in Argentina right now. And so it shows the misnomer of people believing in their fiat currency. So it shows how strong that is, even in Bitcoiners. as a mental model, because they're measuring their wealth in Bitcoin in fiat dollars, and it's the wrong way to look at it.
Totally. And imagine what's going to happen when this liquidity is coming back, like more money is going to be printed, combined with the halving that's going to happen next year in fiat terms. And again, I understand that this is the wrong measure, but in fiat terms, it could be a pretty crazy bull run, which will then, and that's, I think, a positive effect, will attract a lot of media attention and a lot of people, again, 500,000, 1 million people, maybe millions of people, as you said before, and they will come in, they will interact with the space, they will educate themselves. Hopefully, many of them, not all of them, but many of them will not only be here to make a quick buck, but they will also understand. So they came for the money and stay for the tech, hopefully, and for the principles, and they will listen to you guys, Block Trainer, all of you, basically, and they will become educated, and they become Bitcoiners, they will become orange pilled, and then they will become long-term hodlers and DCAers. And in the end, we will make the transition to the better world based on, or better financial system at least, based on Bitcoin. Thank you so much, guys, for taking the time. All of you that have listened, but also our amazing panel of experts. And I will give Knut the last word before we have to wrap it up in like 4 minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Julian. And I'll take this opportunity to do a shameless shill simultaneously as predicting the next bull run, which I believe will commence on Monday, on the 3rd annual Bitcoin Infinity Day, where we'll do, it's also the anniversary of the Freedom Footprint Show, and we'll do a live stream from 4 to 8, or from 16 to 20 CET, from the offices of BTCX, one of the world's oldest Bitcoin exchanges in Stockholm. And a lot of people in this room are coming, and a bunch of others. So come join us then and celebrate the infinite potential of Bitcoin. Yeah, thank you very much for this space, and thanks everyone who participated. It's been a pleasure.
All right, thank you so much, guys. We're out. Hopefully we can do this very, very soon again. Thank you for your participation. Talk to you soon, guys. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye together.
To the moon.